coming from Belgrade.
Sot hapim forumin e 4 të Alban me e drejta mbi qytetin, ku do kemi sot kryeqytetin e Serbisë Beogradin dhe të ftuar profesor doktor Kucina.
Thank you very much for inviting me. But I'm sorry that I don't speak Albanian, but I mean I didn't have a chance to learn it, so I have to have this lecture in English. I am a professor in architecture design, and I work for the last 4 years in one international school in Germany, in Dessau. It's close to Bauhaus, which for architects means a lot because it's one of the pilgrimage places where most of the architects goes, and for that reason it attracts a lot of students. It's an international master for about 220 students, 2-year program in English, and they're coming from all over the world. There are about 50 different nationalities in the school. So I have a chance to work with the people from all the continents. And each year it's different because they're changing. I'm working on the thesis projects, master thesis projects, which last 2 semesters. The first semester is research, and the second is design. And the topics are, let's say, integrating urban and architectural issues in a critical sense, because what I'm interested in is in the transformation of the contemporary cities. My research area spanned from the studies of informal architecture and urbanity, which I started to work on after 90s, let's say from 2000, and then they evolve towards the collaborative practices, which means collaboration between experts and citizens in transforming, in bottom-up transformations of the cities. What can I say as an introduction? Before I started to work in Germany, I was working for 18 years at Belgrade University. I was professor since 2002. Before that, I was assistant. And I made a lot of international collaboration. Among others, there is one with the Polis University in Tirana, where I was working as a guest professor for 2 years, two semesters, and also included in some workshops. And so somehow there, I have to thank them that I work in Germany today, because they invited me for a collaborative project that they developed under DAAD. It's a German academic exchange network or service. So they need a third partner from the Balkans beside the school in Dessau. And then they invited me to participate into this semester project where we made the parallel studios in Germany, in Belgrade and in Tirana, who were working on the projects under the title Participating by Architecture. And we also had 3 workshops, one in Tirana, one in Belgrade, and one in Dessau, where we mixed all these students. We had more than 50 students from these 3 places. So you will see that students from Albania also came to Belgrade in 2012 to work on one of these projects that I'm going to show you now, that I started that year in a special neighborhood in Belgrade called Savamala. I heard today from Tirana that Polis, or Metropolis Institute from Polis University, made the first master plan for Shkodri, and that you don't have any institute here for implementing it and for maintaining it and for, let's say, for managing the whole process. Because one thing is making the plan, another thing which is much more important is how you develop that plan in reality. And I think without these institutes, it would be almost impossible. So I wanted to contribute to Tirana's effort to develop a consciousness about the necessity of urban planning and urban management even in Shkodri, and that's why I wanted to come here, thanks to her invitation. I was nearby having a workshop in Podgorica last week, and it was very easy to come here just for 1 day and make this lecture for you. I want to thank Tirana for making the invitation. I will start the lecture finally with a very short elaboration about what the term post-socialist city means because it is elaborated detailedly in many different theories, also among urbanists, but more about sociologists and experts from humanist science. It's let's say a recent term that the urbanists start to use, because they're all the time engaged in the urban transformation, so somehow they neglect the political transformation because they treat themselves as a technocratic elite, which is just following the orders from the politician. As the ideologies are changing, so also the production of the space is also changing itself. So as you know before, like we had this socialist ideology which was run by the Communist Party, but the communism never came. So that's why I cannot call this post-communist city, because communism was our promised future, not the reality that we were living, which was socialist. And as it was in the theory, socialism was just a transitional period between capitalism and communism, in which all the contradictions of these two were mixed and confronted until they should be purified. At least that was the theory that we were living. Of course, because the whole process was run from the top, we never had a chance really to feel this well-being that was promised in a way, at least differently in different countries, let's say. I would just, it's very important to notify the change that happens, and I will make it in a very short elaboration. Instead of collective values, we have now individual values, because we regress towards the capitalism, because this road to communism was broken, so we are going back to individualism. Instead of solidarity, we have internal competition, where individuals are fighting between themselves or among themselves for the better position, to get a better profit. And instead of well-being for all, we have a personal success as an aim of all this process. So when you translate all these values towards urban arrangements or urban planning, or let's say urban transformation that is going on without the plans in most of the time, you get a whole deregulation of the process that happened before during socialism, which had some kind of norms and standards that were trying to be good for all, at least. I'm not saying they were good, but they had this idea that they had to satisfy the whole society, and they had to find a balance, some kind of human balance within the people. Of course, there are much more details we can say about that, but let's say that today this is not an issue anymore. There is a kind of coalition between city administration, sometimes it's a government, and the developers in order to provide profits. So the only interest is profit interest, and the city planning from, let's say, social from a social methodology went into business methodology. And this is very important when we face this post-socialist city today. What we see is like something like this. It's a new Belgrade that was started to be planned as a modernist city during the socialist time, but it had all this transformation in this post-socialist period, which lasts already for 25 years, in which you have many new individual buildings that are completely unrelated to each other, that are fulfilling any empty spaces that was there. They're competing among themselves for a better market position, basically. So there is not any more integrity within the city. All the regulation that were happened before become deregulated to please the developers and satisfy their predatory interest for a profit. There is nothing human in that. It's the only business-wise thing. But the cities are still growing, and they are building now without the control. Again, in the theory, or even if you read United Nations Urban Agenda that was issued last year in October in Quito, which is a document that is describing the urban development in the next 20 years. This kind of development which we face in the post-socialist city is considered as unsustainable. And it's unsustainable because it excludes society and it tends to disintegrate the city, to develop it with a different, unevenly, with different zones that are unequally developed, which slowly goes to degeneration of the city and its dysfunction. So this is something that we need to correct. I will now focus on one of the central neighborhood in Belgrade called Sava Mala. Sava is the name of one of the Belgrade's river. Mala comes from Mahala in Turkish, which means neighborhood. So it's a neighborhood on Sava, which is this, let's say, illustration of this uneven development of the city. Because now when you have most of the interests of developers that is concentrated on New Belgrade, which is just across this river that you see here, this stayed neglected still. There is there was, at least when we started this project, there was not really an interest for many reasons, because Sava Mala is neglected not only in the recent period, but it was neglected, I would say, since after the First World War. So already for, let's say, 80 years, it became in a kind of process of decay. And that happened because before the First World War, Belgrade was on the boundaries between the Serbian kingdom and the Austro-Hungarian kingdom. And before that, it was the boundary between Ottoman Empire and Austro-Hungarian Empire. So there were two greatest empires in the European history, which were confronting and fighting on this line. So the Danube and Sava goes in Belgrade into Danube. It's on the confluence. Basically, Belgrade was one of the fortresses which had very important military position for both sides. During the history, it was mostly under the Ottoman, but then for some period it was also Hungarian. So both of them, you can find the traces on the fortress from both sides. They were building and demolishing and building and demolishing. And that building and demolishing happened, or also continued already until now, 21st century. So let's say that there is a note that Belgrade was destroyed more than 40 times in its history and then rebuilt again. But somehow it grows up to 1.5 million people that are living there. And Sava Mala, before the First World War, had some kind of golden age, because it was on the border, so there was no any bridge, so there was a kind of river ferry that was connecting some cities on the north side, which is flat area, and Belgrade. So there was a port there, and around the port there were a lot of trade, and around the trade there were a lot of cultural institutions. So you can find some huge palaces there, which are all declared as national heritage at the moment. Sava Mala is this area here. So you can see it's about 2,000 people are living, and there are about 7 or 8 blocks, and there is a main street, this one here, which is called Karađorđeva, one of the heroes against the Ottoman Empire, which is one of the main arteries of Belgrade, because it connects all the traffic that goes towards the railway and bus station that are in the neighborhood. So because of this position, because so many trucks and buses were going through it, and because of the proximity of the railway and bus station, and because the center moved away on the top, Belgrade is on the reef, so the center is now 5 minutes on the top, on the top of the slides. It became neglected, it became forgotten. But it has a beautiful position. It's the only part of the Belgrade where actually the city structure is coming down to the river. And the riverfronts are the best part of the city. You can see now just the daily elements from the moment in 2012 when we start to work there. You can see some old palaces which were not maintained, and a lot of traffic and dirt. And basically no one ever wanted to live there, or even if you live in Belgrade, you didn't want to go there unless you needed some iron elements or something like that. It was a kind of forgotten part of the city next to bus stations, so we actually didn't have any reasons. And because of the collapse of the socialist companies who had some storages and warehouses and some kind of light industry there, there was a lot of empty space that appeared, which belonged some part to the municipality, some part to the city, some part to the state, and some part were privatized during this transitional process. So it was unclear, actually, all the way until 2009, why there was no reason to be there. And I think that provided a facility for this small cultural organization that were in the private, let's say, NGOs and different things who wanted to contribute to the culture, to the urban culture, to get there and to open their first centers, like private cultural centers in that area. They could rent for a little money these empty storages and they could start their programs. And I will show you three of this organization for the beginning, because these organizations were the catalysts of the process that happened afterwards in the following 4 years, where Savamala had, let's say, passed the process of urban transformation and now became one of the most hottest spots in the city, that even many foreign magazines, Guardians and New York Times, recommend the people to come, when they come to Belgrade, that they have to visit that place. So in only 4 years, from one decayed place, wasted, neglected, without any help of the state or any budget, which could be like significant, we managed to transform it to one of the most popular places for the young urban culture. I will show you how it works, and I will show you what is my contribution in that process. This is a cultural center Grad. It means the city. And they were the first one who came there in 2009, and they're still running their program, which of course includes also running a bar, because it's their main resource of finances, but also exhibition space and conference space at the top. They have about 600 square meters, 300 on two levels, 300 in each. And I think it's very important, because with that program they start to attract a lot of young people who are starting to get to Savamala, and as I said before, they had no reason to be there. These are all very low budget organizations that don't make non-profit organizations, basically, that manage to survive due to mostly European funds and some project funds and so on. But with that money, they manage to restore the places where they are with the help of the sponsors, and depending on sponsors, they can get materials. So all this, in the architectural sense, all these projects are opportunistic, because they use the space in a raw condition, and they manage to complement it and soften it, because the space is very raw. It's a storage space, you know, with some kind of details that are not so expensive when you compare. So with that, they also, in a spatial sense, they become a new places where people can sit and meet and talk and spend their time comfortably. These are pictures from another place that was opened after KC Grad, maybe 3 years ago. It's called Nova Iskra, which means the new sparkle, and it's renting also another storage space. They're co-working space for young designer who can gather there, rent the table, and start up their first commissions. And then after, when they become, let's say, established, they can move and provide the space for the new one. But beside these co-working facilities, they also do a lot of educational program in which they try to connect developers and designers and explain each other about why they are necessary. And this is the third, and I think it's very important for my work, because it was opened by a friend of mine, and then I was invited to help them, and this is how I get involved into the whole process. Is here. It's called Mixer House. and they rented from the private owner, because this was a company that was privatized, but it was unused, an old garage that was meant for demolishing already in 40s, but it never became demolished, so it was unused for a long period. So they started to operate there, and then after a year they managed to get some money and redesign the space. They're called mixer because they're mixing all these different programs within one space, which is huge space, the biggest one in Belgrade, 800 square meters. I mean, you don't have, even among the institutional one, you can hardly find such a space. And they use, it's very adaptable space that in 1 hour can become anything you need and you want. And beside cultural program, they also develop a commercial program so that they could survive. However, they didn't manage. I think in this weekend they will have to move out from this space because the owners started to raise the rent too much. So they develop another one, and during the summer they're going to develop and then open it in September in Sarajevo in Bosnia. So Mixer House will be closed on the 1st of May and open again in Sarajevo at the middle of September. But they're staying in Belgrade, so they will open something in Belgrade as well. It's a very special thing. You know, all these cultural institutions actually managed to emerge after the collapse of the official cultural system that was happening, because this collapse happening because of less of the state money. Serbia has the lowest historical, lowest percentage from the state budget that is invest in the culture. It's only 0.6% of the whole annual budget of the state is going towards the culture, and that money is only enough to give salaries to the people who work in the institutions, very small salaries, but not to develop programs. So these private initiatives, citizens' initiatives, are substituting this lack of state interest for that. And another thing is also that they understand culture not only as a kind of elitist realm where you are enjoying, I don't know, different artistic performances, but as a culture of living, as an everyday thing, as something that connects people and provides values within societies. When Mixer House moved into this warehouse, they understood that their position actually provides opportunities for people to transform the whole neighborhood, not only the indoor spaces. And then they invited me to help them to create a strategy of this transformation. And for the first festival that we organized, it was organized in May 2012, and it lasted 1 week, and then it repeated every week. So we had Mixer Festival since 2012 until today, which is the last one, every year. For the first festival, we mapped 70 empty spaces in Savamala, deserted, unused indoor spaces. And we asked the groups of artists or activists or initiatives to use these spaces for 1 week during the festival and create their own program within them. These were the spaces that were empty for many years because of this collapse of the socialist industry and companies, and nobody had a commercial interest to use them because Savamala was neglected and not attractive for the people. So they were really a good opportunity for us to start up completely new process. It was very successful. For that purpose, I developed a long-term strategy based on bottom-up initiatives and on the links among the actors or stakeholders, you would say, but not the business stakeholders, stakeholders that were present, or we wanted to bring them in Savamala. And this is let's say, the key of this strategy, the key points of this strategy, which is all based on the sharing. And sharing is very important things, because this is something that connects people to start to work together on some kind of very, very huge transformations that seem impossible to any individual. The state didn't want to do anything. There were no budget, and the only capital we have are these personal investments that we can put. And I will explain you how this individual engagement actually get networked through these strategies and then become really a force that transforms our Mala to a certain level. So we are sharing knowledge, actions, and visions, and we, for the first festival, we managed more or less to launch all these components that were important in a different scale, but it was important to launch them all together. And I will show you what we did just before to explain this kind of network system. The idea is, it's known in the social network theory that you can actually get a lot of capacity if you manage to connect the people, but not under the certain hierarchy, but actually let them to be what they are already doing, just in relation to others which are doing something else. So this central network is actually built out of many networks that these people anyhow belong as individuals who are using the cities or who are living in the cities. But they also can contribute to this common network if they just deliver, I would say, if they share their capacity with other people. And because they are diverse and because they are doing different things, they become almost like a new entity in the city, which is, let's say, powerful enough to transform the neighborhood. If you manage to create this network strong enough, if you connect every citizen in the city, it becomes a capacity to transform the whole city. Here you can see this diagram that shows, let's say, visualize this process within the urban matrix. So some people are doing something in some part of the city, some people are coming temporarily, some are standing there. It has to be very vibrant, and on the everyday base, even the small conversation between two persons can contribute to the overall transformation because they become engaged within this big process that is turning on. You know, they are creating the energy necessary for these huge things. So you can see some different kind of skills and hubs developed for different functions. Somebody is doing, let's say, more intellectual work, somebody is doing more manual works, but all together they're creating the whole society. Somebody is doing art, somebody is mechanics, you know, so you need all of them together in a very close space. I mean, to be able to turn this wheel and to maintain it for a longer time. This collaboration between the people is, in theory, again, known as commons, and I was trying to explain today it's the third realm. It's not private and not public, and it's not commons in the sense how it was treated in the socialist time, or cooperative that we all know how they deviated from the original position. This is the voluntarily, let's say, gathering of the people around some common source which they decide to share. And they're also sharing responsibility in its maintaining and its development. So everybody is contributing with different skills and activities depending on his own personality that is there. So commons, beside being, let's say, a social hub, it is also contribute to all this kind of other social presences, like or social values, which are important for society, which brings us back from this post-socialist stadium where everybody is individuals and nobody takes care about anybody else. This is rebuilding the community, rebuilding the sense of community that we all belong, which is important for the city. And just to finish, the word polis, like in the old ancient time, which is the city itself, it didn't divide society from the space. It also meant the inhabited space and the people who are inhabiting this space. So polis was all of this together. And we are trying to bring it back in today's world because these two notions were split in the history. Because the city became the object of some technocratic treatments of political elite and urban planners who were close to political elite, and the society becomes complete under some kind of ideological treatment. So it all becomes splitted in the history, and that's why we always feel that we don't belong to the city as we used to be in the traditional sense. French urban theorist Henri Lefebvre introduced this notion right to the city, which is the title of all these events that you are organizing here in Shkodri, somewhere in the 60s, 70s. And the notion was actualized recently, in the last 10 years, by David Harvey, American professor. It actually gives you, it's a declaration written for any expert interested in the urban development to explain them why it's necessary to bring the city back to the community, or for the community to take back the city to itself. And this kind of cooperatives are the tools to proceed with this activity, or represent both representational tools and both actional tools. To run this process in practice, I needed to create my own agency, or my own organization, if you want to say, and I name it School of Urban Practices, because my capacity was academic professor. I don't do much political work. I'm not engaged actively in the urban politics or in the institution beside university. And the only thing I could do is to take my studio from the school. I was teaching at the master courses, so the final fourth and the fifth year, and put it on these streets. We get a space there, we found a space, and we moved the students who accepted to choose to work with me for the whole semester in that space in Savamala, so that we could start different participatory projects, which I'm going to show you. Since most of you are not architects, this what I did is very, let's say, alternative way of thinking about architecture education. It exists in some places, but not in Serbia. In Belgrade, it looked very radical. And most of the knowledge from this came from my own learning. I had a chance to be a guest professor in New York at Parsons School of Design in 2009. And beside teaching there, I actually learned a lot from discussing with colleagues. And then I get into this realm somehow, which was continuation of my studies of informality, and get the idea about how this methodology could be applied in Belgrade. So in some sense, that was complete novelty in the educational process. In these comics, you can see explanation, elaboration of the School of Urban Practices, which was done by two Swedish master students who choose to deal with participatory design programs in Belgrade. And then they make this comic as a master thesis book in KTH Stockholm, one of the universities that I was collaborating with. So you can read this. The School of Urban Practice wants to redefine the architecture profession as a field of transformative activities between academic research and urban activism. And I think that's a completely new model of education. For the first festival, I had a chance to invite friends that I know. Some of them were from United States, some from Europe, because I wanted to create a think tank made by the people who already had a lot of experience in these bottom-up and collaborative programs, and to show to other people, because in Belgrade it's completely new knowledge, let's say, so to bring this knowledge and share with the people from there. And we had a 5-day conference that was happening during the whole day from morning to evening in the nightclub during the daytime when it was not used. So it was our opportunity of reusing the empty space that was already there. And I just want to say, for the university, you don't need anymore the building. The whole city can provide enough spaces for the university. One of the ideas of School of Urban Practices is that the city is the university, and every space could become a classroom. I asked students in my studio to create, this was one of the workshops really done in 1 month, to design and to build by themselves places, temporary places, where we could meet and talk and discuss things, and then when we are not using it, then somebody else can do that. And we managed to build 7 of them during that festival and distribute all around Savamala. This is the serious of the project, but since you're not architect, maybe you're not too interested into that. Let's say, which are actually showing the way how we learned and how we discussed and how the lecture was giving. During this festival, I also organized 7 parallel workshops run by some of these people that I invited, but participants on the workshops were the students from this free university that were part of the exchange. So Albanian students, German students, and my students were all together working on building these things in Savamala for more than 1 week. And this is one of the projects that they did in these common workshops. All the things that they built were the spaces for gatherings and meeting and talking, chatting, discussing, something that connects people, that put people together in a very practical way. We also did one of the community projects in one of the courtyards in Savamala, in a place where actually there was no community, because and there were more than 20 apartments around the courtyard. All the people didn't speak to each other for ages. They were hating their neighbors. I think that's a common thing in Balkans. It's not, and I think you can have a lot of this example here in Skopje. And then by working in 5 days with those people individually, looking for their personal histories and the relation to the space, they managed to organize this common meeting where each neighbor was bringing out their table and creating one huge table, and then they have a big party and they made some decoration. It was the first time in the history of this place that such thing happens, that all the residents came out and start celebrating together their gatherings. We also did several more than 50 visionary projects that were built on the idea that in case people managed to get together and they managed to develop even some kind of economy as a cooperative, they could actually create a collaborative economy that needs the spaces, that will produce or reproduce the spaces from the existing one. So I was wondering how these spaces would look like in the future, I said, as in case this wheel start to work. And one of the things that I asked the students is to use the existing plot or connect 2 of them to keep all the people who were living there and integrate their programs into a new one, and to create a building which will provide a new public space instead of making new boundaries. So I will show you only 3 of these examples. This is like a common garage that could be rent to anybody who needs to have a garage place, but it also have a plug-in other content which provide a space for community to meet, to have a party, to discuss, and so on. This is like the space that provides urban farming and market and kitchens that could be used by community, some kind of common restaurants. And this is the space which is combination of do-it-yourself and startups, because you can take the materials from the storage in the bottom and build your kiosk at the roof, create your business, run it until you get some kind of enough finances, and then dismantle and leave the material to others who will redo it again. So it's a kind of a special cooperative startup. In 2013, School of Urban Practices became one of the actors of the project called Urban Incubator, which was run and initiated by Goethe Institute in Belgrade. It's a German culture institutions that are all around the world. And it's interesting that around that time they started many different urban projects around the world in which they consider culture as a tool to transform urbanity. It was very close to our idea that we had before we even met them. But this coincidence actually helped us to strengthen our position within Savamala with the international support. That enabled us to meet new people from Germany, Austria, and Switzerland who were passing new levels of knowledge, especially in the participatory design. In this case, this is Marjetica Potrić, Slovenian artist who is teaching in Hamburg Art Academy, and she brought her students, so we have a collaborative project with them. This was one of the cases when we did. And then we also shared our space that we already had with the Raumlabor from Berlin, a group of architects, architect collective from, I think, 20 years ago they started, who actually is one of this collective who has a great reputation among the architects in this kind of projects. They were actually doing very practical projects, so they brought the machines and they installed a small microfactory, a carpenter shop, because they wanted to teach us how to use existing materials and to create urban furniture out of it. You can see here that Goethe Institute actually brought more than 10 groups from that region, Germany, Austria, and France, and Switzerland, and they had to stay 6 months in Savamala and do their project, which were all community orientated. We were using this abandoned building site, I would say, which was private, like old house that was privatized, but then never finished because the owner bankrupted, so it was stayed empty for a long time. And we built some containers, and we used that as a meeting hub for all this organization. This place is called Spanish House, and it's important for the next. It was called Spanish House. I mean, they had a local name. Yes. Where we could all meet, because the urban incubator used, I think, 7 different spaces within Savamala, so we needed the spaces to meet, and Spanish House was a hub. And this is how these other spaces were renovated, with a very little budget provided by Goethe Institute. It's important because this interior actually was awarded in 2014 with the first prize for interior design in Belgrade Architecture Salon. It's an annual event. It costed only €2,000. Because the capital is not in the money, it's in the people. We also use, this is Marietica's initiative, it's a shipwreck that was staying there in Savamala for ages. And she developed a community culture center there. And for 2 months she had a continual program every day. Sometimes it was movies, sometimes it was making food together, sometimes it's together with her students and with the neighbors. The School of Urban Practices wanted to contribute with a new project there, and we decided to contact the neighbors, the residents of the building that we had our space, and to offer them our architect service to transform their unused basement and the courtyard into a common space, into some kind of common kitchen or kindergarten or space just for the free time. I just want to show you, this is the basement. And this is the courtyard, because it's on the slope, so it has a kind of outdoor and indoor space, about 500 square meters altogether. So for that purpose, I developed a whole methodology for participatory design, and I will give you a sketch just to understand what it is. Also, the students were, by doing this participatory design, they were learning, and it's very important. They didn't know anything about this before. So it was part, again, also of the educational program. This program is based on 2 methodological and research fields. One is called user-centered analysis, and another is called participatory action research. And when you go into theory, if you Google it, you will find a lot of books and knowledges. So they are all like a cosmos of knowledges, I would say, mostly coming from the United States. User-centered analysis is a method from the product design, which is based on defining a profile of a person for whom you are developing a product before you start developing a product. And I use these profiling processes to create a special questionnaire and interview all the residents of the building. So based on this interview, we could create a common profile of the people who live in that building. This common profile contains all the contradictions of all the people who were living there. It's very important to understand that you never ask the people what they want and what they need, because you will get very stereotyped answers. So this is the way actually to understand what they want and what they need without asking these questions. It's all serious a question you need to ask, of course, but these are too detailed maybe to explain. When you build a profile, you're actually using 4 categories that you need to understand based on the answers that you get. So the first one is called motivations, the second one is trigger, the third one is unmet needs, and the fourth one is symbolic capital. But I'm running the workshops. I just had in Podgorica the workshop, and it took me the whole day to explain to students how they should actually operate with this, because we were exercising this kind of methodology. in that, so I will not go too much into details. Based on this let's say the keynotes programs that you understand from this questionnaire, you can develop some fragments of the spaces, and then you can put them together into maquette, and then you invite these people whom you ask to come and intervene in the maquette, to change it, to deform it. It's very important that in this participatory process you engage people to become your partner, so they have to be participating into decision-making process, not only as a crowd which is saying yes or no at the beginning or the end, but they really have to be involved from the beginning in the all stages of the process. And these kind of discussions are very often. And it's very important to use any opportunity for some kind of common action, and this was like cleaning of that courtyard there, to build up the trust among the people, because as I said, the community doesn't exist actually. Through the project you are also building their trust, and through the trust you're building their community. And this is again part of the participatory action research methodology. It's very difficult to do that in the post-socialist city, because as I said, people are mostly one against each other, and they don't trust to each other. They think the others is always going to misuse their trust. And even if you come with a very good intention, they believe that you have hidden intentions. And I think that's common for all post-socialist countries, especially for Balkan countries. So this project didn't succeed, but because more than half of the people managed to organize and sign a petition that asked us to leave them alone. They didn't want the common space, they didn't want us to interfere into their everyday routine where they don't meet each other. So that was kind of internal conflict within this building, and we decided since they're in the conflict to stop the project basically, because it was unnecessary to develop. But luckily in the next year we got another European grant which was initiated by a partner from Spain, and it's an architecture collective called Basurama from Madrid, and another actor was from Skopje, like academic institute from their university there, and then I was the third actor together with the mixer house. So Basurama actually wanted to teach us their method in which they were applying in Madrid for some years. Since 2010, after this Campo de Sol occupation, which was part of this Occupy movement all around the world, all this group of activists that were sitting there for months decided to go to different places of Madrid and continue their activities within their neighborhoods. That became a very, very powerful tool, and through the time, if you remember last year, they managed even to change the city government. So now in Barcelona and Madrid, you have this big experiment with this activist group actually managed to take out all this political establishment that was ruling the country for more than 30 years, both sides, both opposition and the government party, and to take really a powerful political position in which they can run the city and create completely new urban policy based on the idea of commons. Here you can see the recent map of Madrid activism, and each of these sign is one of the initiatives, citizens' initiative within the neighborhood with different goals and names, but it shows the multitude of this self-organized activity that are networked, and through the network actually they are overtaking the whole city. This is one of the examples, and it's now becoming part of every architecture book even. I mean, this is like a role model for all the activist actions. It's called Campo de Cebada, and it's in Madrid. It was a public swimming pool that was demolished by the city to get a free plot that they wanted to sell to private developer. But then the crisis came in 2009, so nobody could buy it, so it stayed empty for some period of time. And then Basurama helped the neighbors to get into that space that belonged to the city again and create their common space for daily meetings and spending their time. So they have a basketball court, they have a theater, they have some bar, they have urban farm, and they have a lot of educational programs which are going on there. We decided to do similar thing with the Spanish house that I mentioned before. It's a place that was already activated and we could use it. And we asked the neighborhood association that we met there in these years, with whom we already collaborated, and who was cleaning the waterfront and keeping some kind of traditional things in Savamala. So you can see they're ordinary people. So we again did this participatory methodology. We interviewed them, we built them maquettes. The theme was how to develop modular urban furniture that could serve them for some times, and that they could move it to another place and so on. So we developed 7 different pieces that could get together in the Spanish house, and here you can see the discussion with the people about that, and here you can see how we built it actually at the end. And here you can see how we use it. That process took about 3 months in these 3 slides. And the Spanish house was used for another 6 months until the winter basically came, when we moved these places in somebody's basement, and it's still in use somewhere. I lost the trace. However, we in Belgrade in Serbia are at the moment, I think at the beginning of this process that's happened in Spain in 2010. So we don't have a power like the activists in Spain, and it's not easy to fight against this new governmental initiative that happened in the meantime. As I said, Savamala changed during these years, not only because of us, but because there were other actors who were opening their shops. And so now you have more than 50 places there that are all, some of them have culture programs, some of them are bars, some of them are nightclubs, some of them are bike shops. So you have some kind of transformation that was successful, but to get into another phase, which should be more physical, so that you can really transform the whole building and the payments, and take out the traffic and so on. I mean, there's the whole sorts of action you have to do. You need to collaborate with the city authorities. However, these city authorities didn't want to collaborate with us. They want to collaborate with the Emirates. I know that in Albania you used to follow Serbian television or Yugoslavian television a long time ago. I don't know if you're following it now, but just for those who are not following, this is our Minister for Infrastructure and Construction building. This is our mayor.
Mayor of Belgrade.
They're both younger than me, by the way. This is the director of this joint venture company, which was made by Arabs and Serbian government, which is called Belgrade Waterfront. And this is Alabar, the developer from Abu Dhabi, actually from Dubai, but then he established this company in Abu Dhabi, who brought the whole know-how and money, and this is the translator. So this is their vision, to build the Belgrade waterfront. It's a 20,000, they want to bring 20,000 people there, in the office, hotels and residences. They want to make the biggest shopping mall in Balkans in the highest tower, one next to the other. So Savamala is somewhere here. In order to proceed with this plan, which was in this sense, this maquette and the rendering that they brought, which was produced by Arabs, actually some Canadian companies that work in Dubai and so on, they had to abolish all the Serbian law. So one of the laws, so it bring the new lex specialis, basically, only for that purpose, to make this like a project of national interest. But shopping mall in any country cannot be a project of national interest. So they had to make a special contract based on the agreement between Emirates and Serbian government, which abolish all the Serbian law. So you don't need tenders, you don't need anything. It's complete top-down corrupted system. So let's say this, what you see here, is not a city, it's a financial transaction. This is visualized in the form of the building. So from this post-socialist management, we enter into globalist, capitalist, financial, speculative world. Which are only different in scale, not in manners.
Të cilat janë ndryshe vetëm në shkallë, po jo në mënyrën se si menaxhohen. Pra nëse periudha socialiste ishte totalitare, atëherë edhe në periudhën kapitaliste ose globalizëm vazhdojmë me kenë në sistem totalitar, por thjesht në mënyra të ndryshme.
Of course, they are much more powerful than us, than anybody in Belgrade, and it's very hard to confront, although there are a lot of demonstration against this project in the recent years.
Ishte shumë demonstrata, demonstrime kundër këtij projekti me vite, por që sikurse shifet pushteti është më i fortë se ne.
They didn't succeed much. You know, we have now, I mean, demonstrations that are lasting. Just in 25th of April, there were huge ones to memorize the anniversary on one physical act where the state actually abolished its own law to demolish some buildings that were on the way. Because according to this contract, the state has to provide the empty land with infrastructure so that the developer can come and just plug in their buildings. As I said, the School of Urban Practices is not so powerful agent, and all of us in Savamala, although we did a lot of actions, we couldn't change this process that is run under, you know, the state directly, and the Prime Minister, whom you already know, who is having his dream to realize. So it's very dangerous to interfere in his dreams. So we wanted to make a small symbolical act, and one of the projects which they planned to do is to destroy the only green place in Savamala, to give a counter-argument to it. He was just elected recently in the last month for a president of Serbia, and he won with in the first round with 55%. So he has, so he has an absolute majority, an absolute support, because he learned how to manipulate with the media and with the people. But it's very important to know that all the central Belgrade municipality, he lost. So I mention him only because he is the main manager of this urban redevelopment. CEO. So, as I said, we wanted to have our piece of Savamala. That was the title of our last project that I want to show you. Here you can see the whole process that we took in about 3 months, that started now with a crowdsourcing program, because that piece belongs to all the people in Savamala, not to some association or but to all the people of Belgrade, I would say also.
Because it's public space, yeah?
So we had, it's a public space. So we had to change this process a little bit in order to gather all this information from all the people who wanted to participate. There were more than 200 people actually who participated in the beginning, in the special interview that we made. And let's say it looked like that. We started our work outside in that same place, which was the object of our treatment. And this is the papers that we gathered from the people, and this is how we managed to reorganize them, to have several public debates around it, and this is our product. So a small maquette of that park that somehow compress all these ambitions of the people that were asked to participate. So School of Urban Practice was awarded last year for this project as the best urban project in Belgrade, in Serbia actually, because it's at this annual architecture salon that we are organizing. Although we didn't succeed materially to do something, we were recognized by the mainstream architecture audience, which is very significant, I mean, because we started as a very marginal alternative group. Another significant thing is that the reason why you don't see me in this picture is that I already get out of the School of Urban Practices. I practically canceled myself within that, and I led the students who in the meantime graduated, so they were young architects, to run it by themselves. And they managed to educate a new group of students. I'm now just a consultant. So while we were trying to build something, our government was destroying it. And of course, in this power game, we are the losers. I mean, we don't have capacity to confront at this moment the government. But it doesn't mean that we cannot think about the future and we cannot prepare ourselves for the future. So in the future it's very important to spread this awareness of the possibility of bottom-up transformation and participatory design to other actors and to other places in Belgrade. Because only if you enlarge yourself you can grab the power. So I was asked again to join another EU project that with 11 partners, mostly for Central Europe, Berlin, Prague, Budapest, Bratislava, Katowice, Warsaw, and Belgrade, and which is titled Shared City. That is actually continuing our mission that we started in 2012. This project was awarded with €1,600,000 for 4 years, and it contained more than 150 activities in all these cities, organized by 11 partners there. The part that is happening in Belgrade is that actually dissemination of this action that we started in Savamala. So I made the open call in which we choose one of the citizens' initiative that started 2 years ago in one of the blocks, again in the central part of Belgrade, which is again neglected, like the whole city is neglected. And they started to keep their park, to clean it. So they called themselves the keepers of the park. And they started to mobilize the neighborhood to join them, and they succeeded into that. So we want to give them support in finances and also in knowledge, so that they could upgrade these processes and build something that they needed, articulate their public space, basically, which is created by the people. Through these processes of upgrading the public space, they are also rebuilding their community. And I said it's equally important, you know. So we had just started this preparation for this project, and on the May 20 we will have a conference with the partners in Belgrade and 2 workshops that will support their activities, and they will start in the next after that in the following 6 months to develop them. So again, we are exercising this methodology, and the idea is, again, if we manage in the following years to build up this awareness, we could actually take over the whole city and treat it as a commons, which is our ultimate goal. Altogether, we have a power to transform it and to run it as like sustainable urban development. Thank you. I'm sorry it was so long, but it was the translations, and you know, so it was doubled actually the time.
At the beginning you said that communism was not the reality you lived on, but the future promised. Are you a little bit nostalgic about that era?
Not really. I'm not nostalgic. I'm all the time proactive and prospective, so I'm not looking back too much. And in that sense, I'm not nostalgic. But and also, I'm aware of all the mistakes that the Communist Party did in running the socialism, and I wouldn't like that time to come back. You know, in that sense, I'm not nostalgic. So. But I'm thinking that there is a possibility for the new way of reorganizing society, which is maybe not the socialism that we have survived in the history, but some of these, let's say, ideas that actually didn't pass when they become ideology or politicized, like maybe Bakunin or something like that, anarchism. You know, this is much closer to the idea that I am promoting, if you look in the historical roots. But they're actually reactualized in that time. So I wouldn't like communism in the way as it was to come back.
Qeshjash se raporti midis pronës private, dhe asaj çka duhet të ndërtohet në pronën private, e cila është detyrë e shtetit të rregullim, tek ne nuk është më të varë në konsiderat.
There are regulations, and the private enterprises respect these regulations. And these regulations are made so in such a way that this private interest is controlled and somehow also, let's say, offered in some way to the state, because everybody is paying, at least paying taxes. I'm talking about organized states. With this tax money, you can't develop public facilities. So, I mean, this is how the regular countries are working, and I'm completely aware that most of the countries are not working like that. This, what I said, is only for the small number of countries. So let's say if you have the rest of the world, which is maybe 80% of the world, which is living in deregulated condition, where nobody is paying a tax, where everybody is just running its own private interests, the public sphere actually in decay, and it started to be destroyed slowly. So nobody takes care about the public sphere. But the city is not only private property, it is the public sphere. And in order to, let's say, just maintain the city, not to say about transformation and development, you need a lot of articulation of this private interest for the public, because every private would have some benefit out of the better public. Since it's not happening, you know, this kind of, I'm proposing for the third way. Commons is not public and not private. It's the third stadium. It could be based on, it could be developed on private property or public property. And it's based on the sharing of responsibility. I think let's say the most significant law that is elaborating commons in practice is the one that was established in 2015 in Bologna. And it's called regulation for.
In Italian, you can say.
No, I don't know Italian name, but it's a law for regulating relationship between citizens' initiative and city administration in developing beni comuni. Italy is a capitalist country, as you know, with declared private property where nobody is paying taxes. But in some places, they start to take Bologna as a role model, so this regulation system is spreading, and it's already in 10 different places in Italy, in 10 different cities. In Bologna itself, there are about 30 initiatives that are developing following this regulation. And some of them are private, and some of them are public. So it doesn't matter really. This difference in ownership actually is not relevant to the question of commons. I think the city is made of private and public properties, you know, it's not, and also there are also joint ventures, so there are also public-private partnerships. And if you look to every plot, and we did like this, the mapping of all the plots in Salamala, it was very difficult to understand what is private, what is public. Because of this transitional process, there are many leftovers in the institutional sense of the property that we used to have, and beside the public, we actually didn't have a state property. We had a social property because, you know, the Yugoslavia had a special kind of socialism, which, I mean, it would be too long to explain how it works. So you had all these kind of transitional shapes of property, and I have, in this place where 2,000 people are living, you have more than 10 different variations in the ownership issues, plus the public space. So it's very hard to manipulate city based only on property issue. There has to be other factors that are important.
There was a special hearing something about the countries near to us in the border, so we have a life as in the box during the regime, so we didn't know nothing out of our cities or our country. So I have a question. I like this kind of participatory because in another way I work with these participatory methods in the rural areas for other things, not for urban planning. And I wanted to ask you how you use it then after to pressure the central or the local government or lobbying they have been involved during your work, so how you are, because in a certain way you have to involve them, so to have the results. So which is your mechanism to make them knowing all your process or all your strategies and
all these projects were open for collaboration with municipalities, Savski Venac, which is the part where Savamala is. And I went there for a meeting and I give them all the papers, I informed them about everything that they're doing, and to a certain extent they were following this, but they couldn't engage too much into this. So they were just monitoring, let's say like that. They didn't take part into this. I wanted to upgrade it because it's very necessary to involve them for more physical transformation. You know, you need more budget. You can't provide that. You need licenses. You need a lot of things to do. But there was, as I said, they're all under control of the state government, and the situation in Serbia is getting worse in that sense. So they're behaving very opportunistically.
In Montenegro, they are more centralized.
Yeah. So it's very difficult to engage them, and I think today is even impossible because it's all very corrupted system. So for my sake, I orientated into developing awareness among the citizens and architects about possibilities of developing these projects. If any administration, people from administration want to come and see, I mostly explained them. They were invited to all the conferences. Some of them came. The city architect of Belgrade was my ex-student still, but he's part of this establishment which is doing these crazy things. But on the other hand, I did invited him to come and to listen to these people so that he can learn something. But this is I cannot do more than that. And everybody who wants to, to learn something can approach me, and I'm helping them to understand that. I educated several generations of the students. It was open to everybody to participate if they wanted to do. That's how much I do, because I'm completely aware of what you're saying. There is a big gap between the experts and citizens. I believe the citizens know a lot. There are things they don't know. I also believe that experts know something, and there are things they don't know. So they have to learn from each other. So the first thing, you have to create a platform in which they will start meeting and exchanging this. So this is the first thing. But the problem is that usually this process of participation is misused by politicians. So they manipulate with it, and they present something like participation, which is actually not. You don't have participation until the citizens are involved into decision-making process. They have to make decisions, not just to be a decoration at the beginning or at the end of the process. And politicians don't want citizens to make decisions because they want to decide together with private developers. So the whole political establishment also has to be changed. And you can see that it succeeded in Spain, which has much worse situation than we have here, because these parties were rooted deeply into population. And they don't exist now in Barcelona and Madrid. They're finished. And you can see that there is a whole movement of anti-establishment new politics, even in France now. Macron, who is maybe part of the establishment, but he's completely alternative politician who didn't exist until today. Cinque Stelle in Italy, You have all this kind of new political movement. I'm not saying if they're good or bad, but at least they're working in these new fields that actually try to articulate the citizen's voice. Thank you.